Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Happy Thanksgiving, my friends. I hope you're enjoying some time with your family and friends today. And if not, I hope you're content and that you're relaxing and doing something fun, something that you enjoy. This is a story that some of you may have heard before, but I chose to cover it not only because it happened on Thanksgiving Day, but I think now more than ever, some of us need a reminder that you cannot take the law into your own hands. The rules and laws in our country apply to everyone equally. It is the very basis of the ideals this country was founded on. No one is special. No one gets special treatment. No one is above the law. The Constitution requires that each and every human being is seen as equal in value. I think some of us have forgotten that. Some of us have decided that they get to decide who the laws apply to and who they do not. And it is the most unpatriotic, un-American concept I can wrap my head around. The law of the land is what holds our society together, and I have great respect for it. A big part of the reason as to why I do what I do here on Dark Hearts is because I despise those who hurt others. I despise people who think they have the right to harm people, to kill them, to defraud them, and I hate a damned thief. So what happens when the criminal becomes the victim? Well, that's what today's story is about. This is the tale of a bitter old man who thought the world was out to get him. He had an ego the size of the sun, and he was convinced that he was the center of everyone else's universe, when the truth was, no one considered him at all. And maybe that was the actual problem. This is the story of the murders of Haile Kifer and Nicholas Brady, Byron David Smith, and the Thanksgiving Day ambush. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. It's a cold Thanksgiving day in Little Falls, Minnesota. The leaves had changed colors and fallen to the ground, and the people in that part of the world were preparing for a bitterly cold winter. This is Nicholas Brady. He was just 17 years old back in 2012, and this is his cousin, Haile Kifer, who was 18 years old at that time. The two were cousins, and they were spending time together during the Thanksgiving holiday. Nicholas was born on March 21st, 1995, in Little Falls. He was raised in a Baptist Christian church and even attended a Baptist school. He was in a youth group, and his parents had done what they could to ensure that they had raised a righteous son. They wanted their son to have good morals and values. Nick did wrestling, taekwondo, strength training, and he loved to hunt and fish. He loved to go four-wheeling and work on his cars. His friends say his smile lit up the room. Nicholas's parents acted as foster parents, and they often took in really difficult kids. In the 28 years they took in foster kids, they had more than 150 kids come through their home. Nick, as he was known, was by his parents' side, helping them with the troubled kids. Now, I'm going to say something here that's going to sound awful, and I'm totally aware of that. I am grateful that there are people willing to take in foster kids. I am. I also worry that when people open their homes up to foster kids, they are putting their own children at risk. It is a very difficult subject for me. Our kids need all the love and attention we can give them. And when you bring another child into your home, your own child is going to have to share your love and attention. I am not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not. I think it's truly magnanimous and selfless to offer a home to a child who needs one. But yes, I also worry that you're putting your own child at risk. Nick's parents said he seems to have been affected by some of the kids that came and went through the home, and his behavior became more troubled. Nick was exposed to troubled behavior, and he often witnessed kids stealing things because they felt they had to. They were raised in survival mode, and they often took things because they were watching out for themselves first, and that often meant stealing. Consequently, Nick started to display some troubled behavior himself. Haile Elaine Kifer was born on October 17th, 1994 in Little Falls as well. She lived there her whole life. She was in her senior year year at Little Falls High School and had just turned 18 years old. Haile did all the extracurricular activities. She wrestled, she did gymnastics, diving, softball, and cross country. She loved being outdoors, going hunting and fishing, and spending time with her family and friends. She had 2 part-time jobs, one at Falls Cinema and the other at KFC. Haile was the all-American girl who was just finding her way in adulthood when all of it was taken from her. This is Byron David Smith. He was 64 years old at the time of the events we're talking about today. He was born in 1948 and had spent his life working for the U.S. State Department. Byron retired in 2012. He had never been married and he lived alone. It does not really surprise me to hear he had never been married because he seems to be a person that was quite miserable to be around, and you might not want to spend a lot of time with him. I cannot imagine who would want to be around this man. He seems to be very crotchety and wholly miserable to me. There are probably others who would say differently, but I've seen the interviews of him, and that is my opinion. Byron David Smith is the typical scary next-door neighbor that isn't friendly, doesn't usually have a lot of nice things to say about other people, and he's the type of person that's convinced the world is out to get him. We're seeing this, in my opinion, more and more as the boomers age. I don't know, there is just this mentality that the world is a terrible place and everyone's out to get them. And I pity these people, but at the same time, I can't stand them. If you choose to be miserable, there is plenty to be miserable about. If you choose to be happy, you can find something to be happy about. I am not a pull yourself up by your bootstraps person. Some people ain't got boots, let alone bootstraps. But you can make the choice to be happy, regardless of your situation. Believe me, I'm talking to myself as much as anybody else because I've had to remind myself of this over and over and over for the last few months. Byron claims that in the months leading up to Thanksgiving, he'd been burglarized a half a dozen times. Now, I do not believe that for 1 second. I have been robbed 3 times in 54 years of life. No one is getting robbed 6 times in 3 months. The odds of that happening are absolutely astronomical, and I don't believe that happened at all. On top of the odds being against that many robberies, Byron David Smith had only called the police 1 time. This is a guy who's going to call the police for anything, and he'd only called the police once. There was 1 police report made by Smith regarding a burglary. He claims $4,000 in cash was taken, his father's prisoner of war watch, coins from a coin collection were taken, and a chainsaw was missing as well. The police took the report on this robbery, and as they always do, filed it away and nothing is done. Look, being robbed sucks. It's the worst. To have some little piece of shit come in and steal what you've worked so hard to obtain, or something that might be sentimental to you, it is such a violation. It makes me angry to this day when I think about all the things I have lost due to robbery. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't let it completely change my life. Byron David Smith, well, he is a different story. He began carrying a gun on his hip whenever he went anywhere, and that included whenever he was walking around in his own house. This guy is at home in his own house with a gun on his hip at all times. That is next level crazy. Get an alarm system, my guy. Set it to stay and be comfortable in your house, knowing that if anyone enters or breaks the glass, the alarm goes off and then you have time to get to your gun. There are alternatives to living in total fear, walking around in your own house strapped. Letting other people make you feel unsafe in your own home is a choice, and Byron David Smith had made that choice. And as we all know, there is nothing more terrifying than a scared old white man with a gun. How many times have we seen this in the true crime community? The guy that shoots the people that four-wheel on his property, the guy that shoots the guy walking through the kind of the causeway on his property. We see this all the time. Smith was so scared that he started spending most of his time living in the basement of his house. He started stashing granola bars and large supplies of water down there like he was in some sort of a war zone. He had let his mind get the better of him, and he was starting to circle the drain mentally. Sadly, his rage and paranoia would lead to tragic loss of life. Byron Byron David Smith was out visiting with some neighbors when he headed home. He drove his vehicle down the street to get back to his house, and as he did, he passed Haile driving in her car. Smith was convinced that Haile had been breaking into his house and stealing from him. Smith knew his house was unattended, so he hurried home to, quote, get ready for her. As soon as Byron David Smith got inside his house, he turned on a recording device that he had purchased to surveil his property. He went down into the basement and unscrewed the light bulbs in the ceiling so no one could turn on the lights with the switch. This guy is preparing. He then picked up his high standard 9 convertible 22 caliber revolver, as well as his Ruger Mini 14, and he sat down in a recliner that was hidden behind the wall. I'm going to show you some photos of Smith's basement so you can get a feel for how this happened. You can see the stairs leading down from the first floor, and this is the area where Smith positioned himself to wait for the burglars. I'm now going to play you the audio recording that he took of what happened that night, but I am going to censor it because this platform will not allow me to play the entire thing. What you are going to hear is this. First, you will hear Nick Brady break the window on the upstairs first floor. Nick then climbs through the window as Smith waits in silence for 12 minutes. Upstairs, Smith can hear someone walking around. Nick had broken into Byron David Smith's house attempting to rob him. After 12 minutes upstairs, Nick begins to descend down the basement steps. As he walks down the stairs, Byron David Smith shoots Nick twice, which causes Nick to fall down the stairs. Smith then walks up to Nick, who is on the ground at the foot of the stairs, and shoots him in the head a third time, execution style, killing Nick. This is a 17-year-old boy who's breaking into a house. Yes, he's doing something wrong. He's been executed. Smith then walks up to Nick's dead body and makes taunting remarks. Then he drags him over a tarp that he has laid out and prepared for this occasion. Smith then drags that tarp into another room. Byron David Smith then goes upstairs in his house, and 10 to 15 minutes later, he sees Haile walking towards his carport. He runs back downstairs and reloads his weapon. He then takes up his previous position in the same chair, and he waits for Haile. Haile spends a few minutes on the first floor of the house looking for her cousin. She's calling out, wondering where her cousin is. Then Haile decides to go downstairs. As she does, Byron David Smith shoots her. Haile is wounded and she falls down the stairs, and then Smith can be heard talking to her. You hear Haile scream, which I will have to edit, and then she says, "Oh my God." Byron David Smith then executes Haile by shooting her multiple times in the torso and once in the head. He then continues to call her names as he drags her into the other room, throws her body on top of her cousin's, and then delivers one final shot under the chin.
You're dead. Oh, sorry about that. Bitch. Cute. I'm sure she thought she was a real pro. I feel a little bit safer. Not totally safe. I'm still shaking a bit, but a little bit safer. I refuse to live in fear. I am not a bleeding heart liberal. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess. Not like spilled food. Not like vomit. Not even like diarrhea. It's the worst mess possible. And some tiny respect. I was doing my civic duty because the law enforcement system couldn't handle it, and I had to do it. They weren't human. I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin. This bitch was going to go through her life spoiling things for other people. Thieving, robbing, drug use. It's all fun, cool, exciting, highly profitable until somebody kills you. Like I'd give a damn who she is.
For hours, no one realizes that both Nick and Haile are missing. It's Thanksgiving Day, it's crowded and chaotic at the family's home, and we all know that teenagers are prone to dipping out on those types of holidays to spend time with their friends and each other. On the day after Thanksgiving, Byron David Smith, who I believe was surprised that no one had come looking for these kids, called the police and reported the murders. The police arrived at Smith's home where he told them that the same guy that had broken into his sister's house and stolen prescription drugs had now come to his house and that he'd shot and killed him. The cops on scene were shocked that there were 2 dead teenagers killed a day ago, wrapped up in a tarp in this old man's house, and that no one had informed them. Smith tells the police that as he shot Haile, she started laughing at him. That did not happen. I know I had to censor the tape, but I am telling you, I've heard the whole thing. Haile was not laughing at him. Smith then tells the cops, if you're trying to shoot someone and they laugh at you, you go again. Oh, do you? Is that what you do when you're shooting someone and murdering them? He then says, I probably fired more shots than I needed to, and I fired a good, clean finishing shot into her head. Look, these kids broke into someone's house. They did. Nick had been breaking into houses in the area. He was tied to a burglary at the home of a former school teacher just the night before Thanksgiving. The kid was a thief. There's no question about that. And there is no question that if someone breaks into your house, you can shoot them under certain circumstances, which brings us to the legal argument. In the law, there are very specific laws and amendments that govern a person's right to what is called quiet enjoyment of their home. People really need to familiarize themselves with these laws. If you have a constant barking dog, if you have a landlord that won't leave you alone, if you have neighbors that make noise, anything that infringes on your legal right to quiet enjoyment of your home can be reported to the police. Along with the laws regarding quiet enjoyment are laws about rights you have to protect your home and property, and these laws are known as castle doctrine. You are the king or queen of your own castle, and your castle is your home. It doesn't matter if you're renting or if you own the home. If you are legally entitled to occupy a space, you are the queen or king of that space, and the castle doctrine laws apply to you. This is something everyone should know. These laws do allow you in many states to shoot someone who enters your house. Now, you need to educate yourself on your particular state before you think this applies to you. Some states have what are called stand your ground laws. These laws allow deadly force without a duty to retreat first. You can shoot someone if they come in your house. As you can imagine, all of the craziest states have these laws, including here in Utah. Other states allow the use of deadly force if you need to defend yourself or property, but you will most likely be arrested for shooting someone if you do, and then you're going to have to prove yourself innocent. Then there are states that do not allow you to shoot before you attempt to escape. These are known as duty to retreat states. You might be in one of those states, so you need to look it up. California has its own castle doctrine that allows people to use deadly force to defend themselves against intruders, and it allows people to use violent force if they believe it's necessary to prevent imminent bodily harm. It is up to you as a gun owner to know what the laws are in your state and to govern yourself accordingly. In Minnesota, where this shooting took place, there is not a stand your ground law, but the castle doctrine in Minnesota does not require you to retreat if someone breaks into your home. You can use deadly force, but you must prove that you are required to use deadly force to protect yourself or others from imminent death or bodily harm. In Minnesota, you must prove that the victim of the shooting was the aggressor and that you had a real or perceived fear of harm, and that, and this is key, You did not use aggression or provoke the attack. Lying in wait is aggression. Lying in wait is provocation, even if someone breaks into your house. A perceived fear of harm means someone else has a weapon equal or greater to the one you are holding. If you are sitting in your house holding a gun and an unarmed person comes walking down the stairs, tell me how you perceive that your life is in danger. You're holding a loaded weapon and they are not. There is no justifiable argument for executing someone that is unarmed in your house while you are holding a gun. That doesn't mean you can't shoot someone that breaks into your house. Shooting them multiple times and then walking up for a kill shot to the head, asinine. You never, ever, ever have the right to execute someone intentionally after shooting them and incapacitating them. This law applies to citizens. It applies to the cops. No one has the right to execute someone after shooting them. Once they are down, and if they've got a weapon, that weapon is away from them, you have a duty to call paramedics. So now let's go back to the cops standing in Byron David Smith's basement, the cops that know all of this about the law and learning the circumstances of the two murders. They know we have to take this guy in for questioning. He's a murder suspect. Under questioning, Byron David Smith tells the police he had to clean up the mess that these kids had created for him. Some people hate it so bad when I do quotation marks. It's very old lady, I know. Smith told the police that he was afraid, and he also had a hard time answering questions as to why he'd prepared the basement with a tarp to wrap bodies in. Well, yeah, you would have a hard time answering that question because there's no answer for that. The investigation continued for months, and then the prosecutor's office made its move. Byron David Smith is indicted and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His bail was set at $50,000 and he posted bond and was released. His trial began on April 21st, 2014.
Story in Little Falls, where lawyers painted 2 very different pictures of Byron Smith, the man on trial for killing 2 teenagers in his own home in 2012. Prosecutors call him a man armed and lying in wait. But Smith's attorneys argue he was frightened and trying to protect himself. 5 Eyewitness News reporter Beth McDonough just got out of the courtroom, and she's live with what the jury heard on day 1 in the trial. Beth?
Testimony just wrapped up during day 1 of the murder trial here in Morrison County. We're standing just outside of the courtroom. You can see the security area right there. Everyone has to pass through that security area before they can get into the courtroom. That's because security is heightened. This is one of the most sensitive murder trials in county history. Now, today, jurors heard from 4 witnesses. And even though Byron Smith didn't take the stand to testify, folks heard from him as well, too. Prosecutors played taped conversations between Smith and police. There were 2 of them, just over an hour long. Smith was candid and cool during the interviews. His voice did start to quiver when he gave a play-by-play of what happened through his eyes. Smith insisted he'd been living in fear after repeated break-ins at his home, about 1 a month for a year. In one of them, guns were stolen from his home. So when he heard one person, then another sneaking into his home, he said it hit a button with him, and he thought, he's not going to wait and see if they have a gun or not. He's going to shoot them before he shot. It turned out neither Nick Brady or Haile Kifer were armed. Smith openly admits he shot and killed them, but his attorney contends Smith isn't criminally responsible for their deaths. He didn't do anything unlawful. Prosecutors disagree, telling jurors he went beyond the limits of self-defense. When asked why Smith waited 24 hours before reaching out to officers, he said even though his Thanksgiving was screwed up, he wasn't going to mess up theirs. It wouldn't change anything. The defense also pointed out Smith came out of his home with his arms up, invited officers in, and told them what happened and why. Prosecutors also pointed out when Smith's first gun jammed that he grabbed a second gun, even reloading it, then waited. Smith, on that audio tape today, said that he did that because he wasn't sure how many more people were trying to break into his home if there were more accomplices. Obviously, we heard from Byron Smith in that audio tape today. We do expect to see some evidence as well in the next couple of days, and that's because Smith had 4 security cameras on the outside of his home. So prosecutors told us that they will play that surveillance videotape as well.
On April 29, 2014, Byron David Smith was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder with premeditation, as well as 2 counts of second-degree murder. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. Smith was immediately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jurors later told the media that the recordings that Smith produced himself were the most damning piece of evidence. This case is still controversial. There are people who don't get it, and that is because they do not understand the law. In the legal world, there is the letter of the law and there is the spirit of the law. The letter of the law is the literal meaning of a law, the definition of that law to the letter. The spirit of the law is the perceived intention of the letter of the law. And we see this difference all the time. Someone might have broken the letter of the law, but jurors find them not guilty because there are circumstances that affect the spirit of the law, the intention of which it is to be applied. The jurors see the perceived intent and acknowledge that even though the letter of the law was broken, there were elements that allow the person to go free. Now, again, I am not an attorney. I am a certified paralegal. I did run a law firm for about 6 years, but I am not an attorney. The letter of the law, as it applies to the Castle Doctrine in most states, is very clear, and there is no question that Byron David Smith broke the letter and the spirit of the law. He not only broke the spirit of the law, he trampled all over it and set it on fire. The definition of defending your property does not allow you to prepare a tarp for bodies, premeditate murder, and execute intruders after they're already down, whether you record it or not. This man murdered a boy and then 15 minutes later reloaded his weapon, lay in wait for a young woman, barely a legal adult, and murdered her as well. That is not what the Castle Doctrine intends to allow. This man is guilty of murder, and thankfully the jury found him to be so. You know that I am a gun owner, and if you are a gun owner, it is your responsibility to know the law. And it is the responsibility for all of us to keep wackos in check and to demand that they are held accountable when they break the laws. I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this case. Let me know in the comments. I want to send lots of love to the families of Nick and Haile. Yes, your kids did something wrong. We all know that, but they did not deserve to die for what they did. We all hope that you are healing and moving on in the best way you know how. To all of you, my friends and my YouTube family, my supporters and my confidants, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. This season is a time to gather with those that you love. And if you don't have loved ones, seek out a community. Will you find your people and put a little time into that? There is someone out there waiting to meet you. You all have something to offer this world that no one else does, and you should share yourself with people in your community. Enjoy your day, my friends, and let's all try to remember violence should always be the last option, never the first. Thank you for joining me today on this Thanksgiving edition of Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It helps a lot, and you know I need all the help I can get. I've got 2 podcasts. This one's called Dining with Death, and this one's called Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. This is the current podcast, and I post new episodes every Monday and Wednesday. Both podcasts are on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. I want to give a special thank you to all of my patrons. Some of you generously give a few dollars a month to help me keep the episodes coming, and I love you and appreciate you so much for that. If you've got a few extra bucks, I know it's the holidays, watch this short video on my channel called Fundraiser. Our community is raising money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that's never been tested. We are trying to help solve some cold crimes. We're about halfway to our first goal. Enjoy your turkey day, my friends. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.